thank you. To touch a little bit on something that I think is fundamental to my understanding what's happening in the region, and then why it's important, particularly from the U.S. Strategic point of view and the defense, our defense point of view. And I'd like to also just correct that I'm no longer an investigative journalist. I left journalism about 15 years ago. I sit at National Defense University, and while I am not ashamed to have been a journalist, I'm no longer identifying myself as such because I don't practice journalism. So I would like to talk a little bit about a concept that I've worked on over the last few years, which is, as you look at Latin America and other parts of the world, people keep saying, well, drug trafficking has been there forever. There's always been corruption. What's different now? Why are you so worried about this now? And I think the answer is fundamentally that what you have in the Bolivarian project that was put forward by Hugo Chavez initially in conjunction with the Castro brothers in Cuba, and then particularly with the FARC and then their allies as they were able to invest in elections across the region and eventually win Nicaragua, El Salvador, Bolivia, Ecuador, Suriname, and other places, is that you, for the first time, I think, in the region's history, you have an alliance of states that view transnational organized crime as a legitimate instrument of state policy. And this fundamentally changes the equation in how one fights or views transnational organized crime and the level of threat it poses not only to the neighbors of those countries, such as Colombia, Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, but it also increases the level of threat to the United States. If you have, we're accustomed to looking at, let's say, drug trafficking as a problem, where what does a narco want when when he's moving product or she is moving product across the borders? They want a border guard who will let them move with impunity. They want a judge who won't condemn them. If they do go to prison, they want nice prison conditions. They don't aspire generally, except for Pablo Escobar in the early days and maybe in the Garcia Mesa regime in Bolivia, where you had the cocaine colonels, they don't aspire to sit as president in Los Pinos, in Plaza Murillo, in Bolivia, etc., as the government. What the Bolivarian movement fundamentally did, in my opinion, is change the dynamics of how states operate and how they view their roles. So if you are Hugo Chavez and you come in and you view your life work as bringing to fruition a hybrid of the Cuban Bolivarian message of creating Gran Colombia and then spreading socialism of the 21st century across the region, then you are able to embrace a series of external actors, as was mentioned, because those are your natural allies. And if you read the Bolivarian doctrine and you read what they talk about, the United States is always identified as the primary enemy of humanity. That's the first point that I think makes it, for the United States, much more different. But the other element is that it gives criminal groups that are allied with the state access to all the elements of state power. So what do you see now? What does that imply? It implies that you can get, as we've seen across the region, travel documents, passports. Bolivia, Suriname, Venezuela, Nicaragua all sell passports or give passports to actors that are antagonistic both in terms of law enforcement and in terms of terrorist activities. Why does this matter? Because they're not giving false passports. They're not giving things that are identifiable when they cross through customs. They're giving real passports. So when you look at Ecuador, and we got the list at one point of Russians who were moving through the region. 400 Russians got Ecuadorian passports in a period of about 18 months. What does that mean? And an equal number, actually a higher number of Russians, about 400 Iranians. What does that mean? It means that these people can travel through the region as Ecuadorians now. They're no longer identified as Iranian. And so when you have the protection of state, it also guarantees that you can do things like move multi-billions of dollars in FARC funds through the governments of El Salvador and Nicaragua back into the offshore structures and back to the FARC. Why? Because no one's going to investigate them. If you control, as Daniel Ortega does, or as the FMLN does in El Salvador, the judiciary, the legislative, and every investigative branch of government, who is going to monitor your financial flows? The answer is no one. Who's going to monitor the multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollars of bogus companies you set up and pretend that are actually functioning and moving money when they don't exist? The answer, again, is no one. Venezuela, I think, carried this to an art form, is now in collapse, so I think that as the Bolivarian structure has moved forward, it's beginning to, it's a lot weaker than it was, let's say, 2 years ago. They've lost Argentina as an ally. Lula probably won't run again, be able to run again. In Brazil and Venezuela is now no longer a safe and stable area in which they can operate. So you see the focus of the group shifting to new groups, like the great effort they put into taking Honduras with the Nasrallah Zelaya combination. There you see all these other activities, but I think that the fundamental difference is that when you have a state that's willing to participate in legitimized transnational organized crime as a method of bringing in money and as a direct method of attacking the United States, which brings in the empowerment of external actors like Iran, like Russia, particularly, then you have fundamentally changed the equation in the region and made it much more difficult for the United States to operate and challenge our security in ways that I think we don't fully understand at a policy level yet. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.